osteogenic layer, the inner layer is the meningeal layer. What layer is that black webby layer?
Arachnoid.
Arachnoid layer. Good. And as you peel those back, then you get to the layer that is closest to the surface of the brain. And it makes the brain look a little shiny. What layer would that be? Closest to the surface of the brain? Pia. Okay, pia. Okay, now when you look at the brain hemispheres, you see these folds. So what are these folds called? Gyri. Okay, and when there are shallow grooves, they are called sulcus. Okay, how about when it's right down deep in here? Fissure. Okay, all right, so this fissure here is which one? Longitudinal. And the fissure right here between the cerebrum and the cerebellum? Transverse. Transverse fissure and longitudinal fissure. Okay, all right, if I were to peel the meninges off of the longitudinal fissure, I would see a curvature like this. Okay, now in this groove that is fitting in there, you've got a blood vessel that is also draining the CSF. What blood vessel would that be? Starts with an S. It's big venous blood and CSF draining through. It's a sinus, right? A sinus. Okay. So the sinuses are going through here and exiting out and draining the CSF. Okay. All right. As we look at the brain, we've got major regions. So this major region is the cerebrum. This major region is the cerebrum. This one would be the cerebellum. This down here would be the brainstem, and then brainstem extends into the spinal cord. And if you were to look at this section under the microscope, the dissection scope, you'd see a little butterfly. There's also a little hole down the center. See how that little hole kind of opened up? That is the central canal. So that is flowing CSF. Okay? All right, on the inside, something very deep inside, you have the diencephalon, right, and the thalamus is part of that. Okay, now the thalamus would have something attached to it here. What would that be? Pituitary gland. And here you can sort of see the pituitary gland because the meninges are kind of wrapping around it. In this one, they have the pituitary gland that's cut right there. So that would be the pituitary gland. Okay, so all of this is your diencephalon, then you've got your brainstem going. You can see some blood vessels, and you can also see some cranial nerves. So what cranial nerve is this? Olfactory. And their olfactory bulb is much bigger than ours, right? Because they rely on the sense of smell. This is a sheep brain. And then what cranial nerve would this be? Optic. Now there's other nerves that are really, really tiny, and they look like little hairs. Like there's one right here. Okay, some of them, the ones over in this region would be like your 10, 11. You can see a little bit of it coming out right here. Okay, and then all these black lines are blood vessels. So the same thing over here. These are going to be blood vessels, most likely carrying arterial blood. Okay, all right. Now this section here is a really neat section. On this side, you're seeing closer to the top of the cerebrum. Okay, and you can see the fissure, which is your what? Longitudinal fissure. There's also another one right here, which is not as deep as the fissure, so what would that be? Right here? Yeah, it's a sulcus. So one is a sulcus, one is a fissure. Now this is white matter, and this is gray matter. And so this would be the cortex. These would be the fibers that are linking different parts of the brain. So if they're going up and down, they're projection. If they're going from the front to the back, they're association. And if they're going from this side to that side, they are commissural. Okay. Now, on this side of the brain, you can also see a cavity. What cavity is that?
Lateral ventricle.
Yes, this is the lateral ventricles. And you can even see some choroid plexus. Notice all that black webby stuff? That's what does the choroid plexus make?
CSF.
CSF. Now, if you guys remember, I told you that in the brain you have organized gray matter, white matter, gray matter. Here's a little bit of more gray matter. What do you think those bundles of gray matter are? Basonuclei. Right, those are the basonuclei. Okay. All right, and then on the cerebellum, you also have gray matter and white matter. Do you guys remember what this white matter is called? Arbor vitae. And the little tiny gyri of the gray matter? Folia. They're the leaves of the arbor vitae. Okay. So, another thing that you have here that's white matter that are your commissural fibers is this big structure here. That is the corpus callosum. And if you kind of look closely there, you can see a little bit of the lateral ventricle and the choroid. And this little fold right here is the fornix. So that means that this right here would be the thalamus. Right below the thalamus is your midbrain, and then the pons, and then medulla oblongata. Okay. So those are your major structures that you can see for this part here for the brain. Now what we can do is we can leave this out, and after class, if you still have time, you want to come back and take. The eye is the optic nerve. Yeah. And on the surface, you have these flat lines of brownish tissue. What would that be? The muscles. That's the muscle. Let me see if there's more muscle here. There's another muscle here. You know how your rectus muscles are like sheets? So that's the rectus muscle. That's the optic nerve. But look at this guy. This guy's huge. Okay, so on the front of the eye, you light to cross through that hole. What is that hole? The pupil. And the pupil changes size based on this structure, the iris. Okay. Now directly on top of that, you would have this, which is the lens. And the lens is attached by the ciliary body and the ligaments. Okay. If we cut the lens in half, then you can see the layers of cells that are making the lens. If this was dried, you'd see the rings, because they're in rings. Now when this is a living tissue and the cells are alive, then it's a little more flexible. Right now it's really hard. Okay? This is what becomes cloudy in people that get cataracts. Okay? All right. Now as we go inside the eye, you encounter this gelatinous type of fluid. What is this? Jelly-like stuff.
Vitreous humor.
Vitreous humor. Okay, and the vitreous humor is filling the posterior segment. So remember, the posterior segment is from the lens back. Okay, now here you see this nice lining of this brown layer. What layer would that be?
The retina.
That's the retina. Neural tissue is usually this tannish color. Okay, and the retina gathers up at one point where it becomes the optic nerve. What's that point called?
Optic disc.
The optic disc, or your blind spot. And here in this dissection, the retina has collapsed, but it's still attached in the optic spot. And if I were to make this hang like this, notice how it's staying put. All that area where the retina gathers, that is your blind spot. Okay? All right, below the retina, in animals that have night vision, you have this shiny layer here. That is called the tapetum. And the tapetum has reflective particles, like you see here, reflective pigments. And that's what allows you to see that shine in the cats when you shine the light at them at night. Okay, so anything that's got night vision is doing that. And as you peel that back, you see black. So what layer would that be? Choroid. And the reason why you see black is because all the light's being absorbed. Okay, that has all those pigments for light absorption. So then this outer layer would be
Sclera.
the sclera. Okay, so those are the three